Sky News Antisemitism Summit at Sydney's Central Synagogue today was brilliant. It's such a tribute to my colleague Sherry Markson, who no doubt have more to say about that straight after my show. It was a real tribute to her, but also I think sent a very important message, including to the Albanese government. There was one part in particular that should shock it. Have a look at this.
The Australian government stands with Jewish Australians in the fight against anti-Semitism whenever and wherever it occurs. Since the very first protest in Australia that crossed the line from legitimate political expression to expressions of anti-Semitic sentiment, the Australian government has expressly condemned words and acts of hate directed at Jewish people. The Albanese government has not just talked about anti-Semitism. We have acted and we will keep acting.
That was the Attorney-General of the Albanese government, Mark Dreyfus, himself a Jew, clearly discomforted by the fact that he was being heckled by other Jews when he tried to defend the Albanese government's pathetic response initially to the anti-Semitism that has burst, metastasised all over this country. Unbelievably, it got worse. Dreyfus then...
Anti-Semitism cannot and must not be weaponised in the pursuit of votes. It must not be weaponised in the pursuit of newspaper sales or TV ratings either.
I hope that suggestion wasn't that our newspapers or television stations are weaponising this, because we certainly are not. We are defending our values and trying to ensure...
That was our Sherry Markson, of course, giving Dreyfus a little smackdown for that appalling suggestion. I don't know whether he meant it. Maybe it was. And Sherry also congratulated him for coming and giving a speech at least. But honestly, that tells you something terrible about the feeling among Jewish people about what this government has been doing or not doing in the face of this amazing challenge to our sense of togetherness in this country. Joining me is the panel, James McPherson from The Late Debate here on Sky News, and Evelyn Ray, farmer, former policewoman and Sky News regular. James, like I said, Sherry did thank Dreyfus warmly for turning up. This wasn't a setup, but what does that reaction from the Jews in the audience to him, to the government, tell you?
Well, it tells me that the Jews in that audience have zero faith in this government's ability or willingness to do what it takes to protect them. Mark Dreyfus had the misfortune of speaking after John Howard and before New South Wales Premier Chris Minns, which means he had to speak in between two leaders, and a leader he was not. He stood up there and began with, Andrew, can you believe it, an acknowledgement of country. So people were groaning before he'd even gotten into the content of his speech. And then, as you showed viewers there, he continually talked about what this government was doing, only to be met with derision from the audience. And pretty quickly, Mark Dreyfus started reading his speech like it was a shopping list. He had the demeanour of a man who just wanted to finish the speech and then get out of there as quickly as he possibly could. There was zero empathy, zero passion, zero conviction. Honestly, it was like he was reading from a telephone book. It was like he just wanted to get the speech done and get on out of there, which pretty much represents what most of us have felt about this government's attitude to the entire issue of anti-Semitism. They just want it to go away and get on with their lives. It wasn't good enough. He would have been better not to have been there at all than to deliver that speech. I was in the audience, and I got to tell you, that is one of the worst speeches I have heard in my life, and I've heard a few.
And I thought it was particularly graceless. He complained, politicisation of this issue. And then, in his speech, inserted a few paragraphs about how the Liberals have been mean to him in Parliament as a Jewish man. I mean, seriously, this guy is so tone deaf. I've had my own history with him. But anyway, meanwhile, Evelyn, I couldn't believe, I don't know, maybe there's nothing to this. Immigration Minister Tony Burke, he is conducting a blitz of citizenship ceremonies, 3 on the weekend ahead of the election, so new citizens can vote in time. But this is such a big and unusual push, with 6,000 new citizens expected this week at Burke's 3 ceremonies at Sydney's Olympic Park on the weekend near marginal electorates Labor actually needs to hold, heavily Muslim ones, some of them. Opposition Leader Peter Dutton at this same Antisemitism Summit smelled the rat. Here he is.
The reality is that Tony Burke is spending today and the rest of this week, as I understand it, conducting as many citizenship ceremonies as he can, and literally putting thousands of people through an express citizenship process so that they can vote in the election within a few weeks, which I think is quite remarkable. And I just question whether there has been any slackening of the process, whether there has been any compromise on the security checks, and whether it's in our country's best interests for people to receive citizenship before the proper security checks have been undertaken, or people have had within the Home Affairs Department the time to be able to conduct the searches that we would expect to be conducted.
Evelyn Ray, is this suspicious, or is Peter Dutton drawing a rather long bow?
Of course it's suspicious. In fact, it sounds so dodgy that when this was shared on social media, you had people in the comments section asking for fact checkers. I mean, no one ever really asks for that, but people could not believe where this was coming from. I mean, how could they be so seemingly blatant? You know, that's 3 days of citizenship ceremonies, as many as 6,000 non-Australians in electorates that Labor is desperate to hold. Just say it out loud a few times, you know, they aren't even trying to hide it. The Telegraph also said that Burke will host 25 pre-election ceremonies, giving citizenship to up to 12,500 people before March the 4th. This just looks like they've taken a playbook straight out of the Democratic Party. I mean, next we'll see Burke loitering around cemeteries or something like that, trying to gather some extra votes. You know, if you can't convince Australians to vote for you, import people who will. You know, it's just not even mentioning our housing crisis. It's utterly disgusting, and we can see straight through it.
James McPherson, what do you think?
Well, I mean, Andrew, you've heard of branch stacking. This is electorate stacking, isn't it? I've heard a rumour that on the back of the citizenship certificates, there's a little how to vote card signed with love from Labor. Now, I don't know if that's true, but nothing would surprise me, Andrew. This is clearly dodgy. I mean, this is a government that said, no, we give local councils complete autonomy as to how they run citizenship ceremonies, when they run them. Doesn't have to be Australia Day. Whenever you want, you guys take care of it. Now, all of a sudden, with an election just perhaps weeks away, Labor are very interested in citizenship ceremonies, so much so they want to be running them, and Tony Burke is there personally handing out the certificates. It's dodgy as.
Maybe they should hold them just before Australia Day, see whether he does the same. Evelyn, I've run out of time, but I want to quickly ask you one thing. I think Peter Dutton is cutting through. I mean, last Sunday, he was interviewed by Carl Stefanovic on Channel 9's 60 Minutes. Now, normally interviews with political leaders, their ratings poison. Ask me about that. But this was a rating smash for 60 Minutes. 628,000 views in the 5 city metros, and that's after 9 p.m. That is actually, those are huge numbers. What do you conclude from that?
I think people are so desperate to have anything but Albo. They're looking around. They are so hopeful that it's going to be Dutton. They want Dutton to be like Trump. I mean, Dutton could really be impressive here. He could really go down as an impressive Australian politician that will be remembered. Problem that we are faced with, he needs to be a heck of a lot less like Albo and a heck of a lot more like Trump. Time will tell whether he can do that.
James McPherson, Evelyn Ray, thank you very much to you both.